So Luton are on a tremendous run at the moment, only one defeat in their last 9 games. Compared that to the start of the season when they only won 2 of the first 9, one of those being Gillingham, and losing 6 in the process. What has Rob Edwards changed since the start of the year? What has he changed? And with the introduction of certain players in different roles, has seen Luton propel themselves out of the relegation zone and having a little bit of the Premier League spotlight on them at the moment. All right, guys, this is a FM24 tactical replication. I'm going to go through the tactic itself. We're going to look at some sort of like real life data as well, and how we put it all together to put into an FM24 tactic. As always, Patreons, the link down in the description. Go check out the Patreon. You can get the 2 direct download files. If not, don't worry, I will go through all the player and team instructions so you can copy it in as the video goes. Let's dive into this. Rob Edwards, 3-4-3, 3-5-2, 3-4-1-2, whatever you want to call it. We're playing with 3 at the back anyway. Let's go. All right, so I'm going to show you some passing networks from the opening 4 games of the season. We've got game week 1 against Brighton. That was a defeat at Brighton. That's the first game of the season. I think it was like 4-0, 4-1 or something like that. And then a home game, which I remember watching on the telly versus West Ham, and I thought, these are in for a long, hard season. And then a game week 4 as well against Fulham, when I think they lost 1-0. And then we're going to flip it round to some of the last 3 games, I think. We're going to cover the Newcastle game, the win against Brighton, and then also the win at Burnley. So this is the passing networks from the first few games of the season. As you can see now, the thing that we're going to be looking at, there has been definitely a change in shape. I think definitely at the start of the season, it was a 3-5-2 with Adebayo and Morris up front. A double 8, generally of sort of like a Chong or a Ross Barkley came into it at that point, with Nakamba being very much a sitter. And you can kind of see this here, how deep they are. Some of these players are obviously not even really playing at the moment. You know, the opening game of the season, I think Giles is even out on loan. That's in Panzu, in it, Pelly Ruddock. He's not really playing at the moment. Lockyer obviously is not playing at the moment. Madge Jewel Anderson isn't playing at the moment. And Tahith Chong has been a little bit of a sort of like a backup substitute option. So there's been definitely a change in personnel, but also the change in particular, the role of Carlton Morris. So as you can see, he's quite high, very much playing. You can clearly see the 3-5-2 structure with the holding midfielder quite deep against Brighton, which you'd expect. First game of the season away from home, you maybe wouldn't expect them to absolutely go for it. However, what I do think is the press has definitely got so much more intense over the last few weeks. I don't know if that's just opposition-wise, and they were playing at home. You know, their pressing against Brighton at home was completely different to the pressing that they were doing against Brighton away from home. It might be a mixture of all 3 things, where Brighton are maybe not in a good moment, they're at home, they're also maybe full of confidence, and then generally just wanting to change it up and be a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more attacking in terms of where they're winning the ball back. Maybe the first 9-10 games when they only won, I think, 1 Premier League game, that was maybe a sign of, like, we need to change this, because by being low block, tight and compact isn't going to get us enough points on the board. And as you can see, the passing networks kind of show that really deep. Carlton Morris pretty much playing as a central striker. He's up there with Jacob Brown against Fulham, up there with Adebayo, up there for the West Ham game, with a really deep midfielder. Now, one person that I want to talk about is Samuel Lokonga. He had a terrible loan spell at Crystal Palace last year, and then I think he's a big reason why they've potentially gone from more of a 3-5-2 to this 3-4-3, and it's a little bit of an isometrical one, and I'll show you why in a minute. They've kind of taken out Nakamba and they've brought in Samuel Lokonga, and then they've taken out a central midfielder, notably probably Tahith Chong, and then put in a wide midfielder. So it's often been Andros Townsend. At times it's been, is it Jordan Clark? I think it's Jordan Clark, his name. So there has been a big change. So from this to this. So this is the last 3 games. A 1-1 draw against Burnley, a 4-0 hammering of Brighton at home, and then a tremendous 4-4 draw against Newcastle, and being 4-2 up in the latter stages of the second half. And as you can see, first thing you can notice, the teams are extremely high. And I just want to point out that I do think it's been a real tactical change from Rob Edwards. You know, the last thing you would really expect a team of Luton to do would be to go toe-to-toe with Newcastle at St James's Park. You know, Newcastle are fantastic in transitions. They want the game to be open, space for those energetic midfielders to move into. And you would think playing with probably a lower block against Newcastle would be better because they haven't really got those technical players to work in tight areas. I think Newcastle generally struggle more with a lower block. So it's really interesting to see them going toe-to-toe with Newcastle at St James's Park. So a real change in how they're approaching games. And as you can see, really clear, a lot higher up the pitch. And I just now want to talk about that role of Carlton Morris. So he didn't play against the win against Burnley, but we're going to use, there's Jordan Clark. Andros Townsend plays all right. So in this scenario here, it does look like more of a sort of like a 3-4-3. And in here again, it looks like a 3-4-3, the win against Brighton. He is actually just by a touch, he is actually the highest player up the pitch. So that's a role that I really want to focus on. The Newcastle one's an interesting one where Ross Barkley, who's generally low, at times he's been the lowest sitting midfielder. I think there's definitely the option of Ross Barkley roaming the pitch a little bit. I think it will depend on potentially the role of Sammy Lokonga and what he does in terms of his press, maybe his trigger press, who he's asked to sort of like do not man marking job, but a tighter marking job on. That may then determine the role of Barkley. And I think because this game ended in, the Newcastle game ended in such sort of like a transition game from end to end, Ross Barkley's tremendous at that. He's tremendous at getting the ball from deep and travelling and carrying. And I do think that's why he's maybe a little bit further forward. And Carlton Morris is literally tucked in as like a double pivot in there. I think it was probably very much like, let Ross Barkley go ahead and I will cover behind him. And obviously, he was so influential in that Newcastle game, Ross Barkley. So there's definitely been a twist. Like, the fullbacks are still getting high. But it's the interest in the roles of the sort of like the right side. So it's been Townsend a bit, and then Jordan Clark has come into it the last few weeks. And the role of the right centre-back has been interesting. As you can see, Reece Burke here against Brighton, a lot higher. Mengi, not so much in this one. But look where he is here. You know, that is like... This is like nearly like Leverkusen kind of right centre-back, the Kasunu role at Leverkusen under Xavi Alonso, the right centre-back so far forward. And what that does allow at Leverkusen is allows Frimpong to push further up the pitch. And I think it is the same with Ogbene playing at that right wing-back role. Traditionally more of a wide player rather than a right full-back. So he naturally, with his energy as well, wants to get further forward. So that's been a little tactical twist as well. I do think as well, Sammy Lokonga being a lot more of a ball-winning midfielder, very energetic, great legs, great energy, compared to maybe a Nakamba, who was more of an anchor, really just sit as a six and sit in there and let nothing come through. I do think that's allowed them to go with that extra man forward, that extra man sort of like, obviously we've kind of spoke about this role here, the Townsend and Clark role, bit of an inverted winger. So they've managed to get rid of an anchor and then put in an inverted winger. So that's a big tactical change. And I do think that's down to Lokonga having a little bit more of energy, fitness in terms of getting around the pitch better than what maybe a Nakamba can do. And then finally, obviously, Ross Barkley, he's coming to his own. He's got his fitness up. And then maybe it's got to the point where Roberts is like, I can trust him to play in this double pivot. Before it was a three-man midfield with a player behind him in Nakamba as a little bit of an insurance policy, but he now wants him, I think, probably to get on the ball in deeper areas. I imagine at the start of the season when Nakamba was playing, it was very much he's the single pivot and Ross Barkley was playing higher up the pitch. Now it's a case of Ross Barkley definitely getting the ball off the centre-halves and being a real heartbeat of the side. So with that, I have put this together. So remember, Patreons, it is now available for you to download, but don't worry, I'm going to go through everything on the screen. So, as you can see, we've got the interesting role of Morris. Now, I did start him as a wide target forward. But we just weren't getting him where we wanted him to be, even though we had at times Sittenauer on as well. We weren't getting him into these areas here. And looking at the pressing, well, we'll talk about the pressing in a little bit when we come to the out of possession stuff. I've got some screenshots from the Newcastle game. Carlton Morris is very much acting as a striker, not as a left-sided midfielder. So, we're going to start at the back. Goalkeeper, plain and simple. Kaminski, goalkeeper on defend. Nothing too speculative. He's higher. His starting position is a little bit higher than it has been if you look at those maps that we've just done on the screen. But that's probably down to just the general line of the team rather than him being anything more than, you could maybe go to a sweeper keeper, probably on defend, or at the very most on support. He's definitely not a sweeper keeper on attack. The back three, now I do think it's improved a little bit with Tom Lockyer not maybe being in the team. Obviously, it's really unfortunate with the problems that he's had. But if we look at the Football Manager stuff, like, he's got a pace of 10. Osho, who's kind of come into the team a little bit more, pace of 14. And Mengi as well, pace of 15. Bell's been an ever-present, but pace of 16. So I think, that potentially gives them the option of squeezing higher up the pitch because they're more comfortable defending when they get turned over. They maybe become more comfortable defending counter-attacks and transitions. So that's maybe it could be classed as a debatable one, but I definitely think it is maybe one of the reasons as well they've been able to push that defensive line a little bit higher. So what we've got is the right side Mengi. Now this could, depending on how, far you go with your press, and, at the moment we've got a much higher line because it was the Newcastle game, you might want to shove him on attack. And then there'll be other games, the games where you're expected really to sit in and a little bit of damage limitation, these away games and stuff. Against the big boys, you might want to go on support or even defend. But I've got Mengi on support, with just at the hope he then pushes Ogbeni further up the pitch. Osho, central defender, on cover, no play instructions, with Bell on that left-hand side, wide centre-back on defend, just to help get that ball to Alfie Doherty. Now, Alfie Doherty's come into the side. I don't know if he was injured at the start of the season or just wasn't fancied as much, but he has become a little bit of an FPL player as well with his assists. Tremendous left foot. Is regarded as more of a winger in the game, so does like to get forward. However, I've just got him as a wing-back on support. It does look like Ogbene gets further into these wider areas and higher up the pitch, with Alfie Doherty looking at crossing ball a little bit earlier. I have also got on cross more often and mark-specific position. The mark-specific position is the right wing-back. This is when we're trying to press high. And I'll talk more about that when we go through the out of possession instructions and why we've done it. On the right-hand side, we've gone for Ogbene, wing-back on attack, because we do want him to be starting a little bit higher, especially if Mengi's coming into these areas, want him to be a little bit higher, and then hopefully he'll drive in that inverted winger that's ahead of him. Ogbene, mark-specific position, and it will be the left it will be the left fullback or the left wing back if they're playing with a back three. Okay, into that double pivot. Now we've got them going a little bit higher just so we could make sure that, especially when we're pressing high, once again, I'll show you some pressing screenshots in a minute. We want them a little bit higher. We don't want them too disengaged from this high press. If we do that and we drop them back, for me, it's going to leave a huge hole in here. And I think with the press, these two go chasing, it's going to leave a big hole. So I really want them just a little bit higher up the pitch. So Sammy Lokonga, ball winning midfielder on defend, no play instructions. And then Ross Barkley. Now, this is an interesting one. Sometimes he's deeper than Sammy Lokonga. So even maybe a register, deep line playmaker at times maybe. I've kind of gone between that and the Ross Barkley we saw against Newcastle, which could have been probably a central midfielder on attack. But I've gone roaming playmaker, so he kind of gets about absolutely everywhere. We've got the player instruction for him, dribble more, because his progressive carries and stuff like his FB ref stats are absolutely tremendous. Bearing in mind that he's in a Luton side, didn't get going up until the last couple of months. A tremendous few months for Ross Barkley. So we've got dribble more and obviously shoot more often. I do want him in around here, trying to let one go. And then front three. So we've gone the right-hand side, Andros Townsend, or the Jordan Clark role, I suppose you could call it. Inverted winger, on support, sit narrow. We don't want him hugging the touchline. He does come right into these sort of like half spaces, in and around sort of like the width of the penalty area. So we've got him that on support. With the front two, Adebayo is an interesting one. You could literally put this whatever. Advance forward, complete forward, target forward, pressing forward. I've gone advance forward just to give us a little bit in attack, get us further up the pitch maybe a little bit, run into channels maybe a little bit more than what you'd expect, obviously, a target forward to do. Obviously, as well, his build-up play ain't great. I do think Carlton Morris is the sort of like the build-up man. So we've got Carlton Morris as the target forward on support. I was going to go stay wider, but then I've just decided to do this isometrical formation with the front two, so that when we press, Townsend comes in here to make a little bit of a kind of an isometrical sort of like front three in terms of pressing. And then he covers the left-sided centre-half, the right-sided centre-half, with Alfie Doherty then pushing up with that mark-specific position instruction. All right. Mentality. Now, this is a debatable one. Like some of the statistics, I think a lot of the statistics that they've got this year, PPDA is quite low, currently ranked 15th. They're actually first in the league for pass length. But I do think, again, if you remember back to those heat and then passing networks, if the defence is so deep and the striker is staying high, those passes are going to be longer than what they probably are now. So I do think Luton's statistics are a little bit skewed, and it's kind of a split between the old Luton and the new Luton, if that makes sense. They are up there, 4th for crosses, 19th as well for total passes attempted. Only Sheffield United have a worse number of passes. So there's that to consider. And then a lot of the other stats like, you know, goals and conceded and everything else, XG, it's all in and around where they are in the league table, in and around Palace, Forest, Burnley and Sheffield United. And Everton, and interestingly, Everton and West Ham for a few pressing statistics are right down there. So they're about where they wanted to be. I don't think they're overperforming. You know, they're not in this hot vein of form where they're overperforming everything and it's going to come back down. I think potentially if they can keep the sort of like the ethic, the team ethic going and the pressing and the attitude towards getting the ball back and stuff, which, let's be honest, is all generally about desire. They've got a fantastic manager that sets them up right. They should be able to maintain this over the course of the season with a couple of changes, obviously. You know, going away at some of the big boys, I imagine they will change. But, you know, Newcastle, they went toe for toe with them and got a fantastic result. So, balanced mentality. I've gone slightly more passing direct. If you want to absolutely go for it, go for it. But I'm more thinking of the Luton of now compared to the Luton of before. They do want the ball into Barkley. They do look for those sort of like lofted passes into Carlton Morris, looking for that inverted winger coming off the line, getting the ball out to the wide players. So I've only gone for slightly more direct with slightly higher tempo. Now, I haven't done time wasting on. To be fair, time wasting is a thing that they like to do at times, so I would probably put that on sometimes. Standard attacking width, we don't want it too wide because we want to make sure that we're good when we lose the ball and we don't get caught out. We aren't going to be too open. Obviously, the two wide players, I've not put them on complete wing back. They're on just standard wing back, so then they keep their width. They're the options out wide, and everything else is nice and compact in the middle. Hit crosses early. We've said they're really high on number of crosses. We've got Carlton Morris great in the air. Adebayo really good in the air, so we're going hit crosses early. Play for set pieces, massive part of their game. Be more disciplined, just so we stick to that tactical philosophy. You know, Ross Barkley and that should do stuff, but everyone else, you know, everything is well prepped and well drilled, and we want that to make sure that these tactics kind of move over into the match engine and really keep the team rigid. I did have play for out from defence on, but I've noticed that's something not really they do. Not amazing in transition. Sorry, not amazing from building out from the back. So nothing really too unique. We're not talking Thiago Motta or De Zerbi or anything like that. So we're just going to keep that really basic. We'll build out anyway, I think, at times. We should have an overload because we've got three at the back compared to maybe a front one or a front two. So we can build basic and get it out to the wide players because we've got focus left and right. If we look at Luton's attacking threats, parts of the pitch, as you could see, looking at attacking down both wings rather than through the middle. All of that then goes into transitions, and I've just gone counter on. There is a counter press at times. If you want it, like the Newcastle one, there was a counter press. I've left it off just because in FM we're not amazing, Luton. But if you're wanting to maybe put this into another team, then yeah, you could go counter press, especially if we're looking at pressing high. Counter attack, left everything blank with the goalkeeper, let him go long at times to the front two. Obviously, if you're going to use this with another side, you need to make sure your two strikers are decent in the air, good physicalities, good height, good jumping reach, good heading, because a lot of the balls will end up going into the target man. I've not also put pass into space on. I think the idea is that they're a little bit more methodical. They work themselves up the pitch. They don't try and go to Adebayor too quickly or make him chase things. They want to keep hold of the ball if they can. Find Barkley, who's brilliant possession, Sammy Lokonga, maybe an Andros Townsend, and getting the two wing-backs going. So I've done that off just to stop that. We kind of kick the ball forwards a little bit too quickly. And then out of possession, like this will change. So we started with a low block. We've done a high press. We've done much higher line. Just change it as you go. You know, it will work generally with anything. I think if you want to be, you know, FM-wise, we know FM suits a high press more than anything else. But for me, it all depends on the opponents. Newcastle last week was extremely high. Okay, and a few little instances. So first of all, this is very early on in the Newcastle game. The ball's gone into Pope. He's got it. We've got a defender just out of shot. I think it might have been Botman, I suppose. We've got Dan Burn, the left back. Right back on that right-hand side would have been probably Kieran Trippier. We've got Adebayo right there with Carlton Morris. and Jordan Clark right there with the two central midfielders in Barkley and Lokonga very high. As the ball then moves out to the centre halves, rolled out, Carlton Morris goes into press centre half, and look at Alfie Doherty going and tracking and pressing a very, very high press with the inclusion of the wing backs. So very important why we've got those specific player position roles into the player instructions. Another one here, 5 minutes later, same scenario, ball's rolled out. Carlton Morris then goes to press the centre half, the right centre half, as he looks to feed it out to the right fullback. And once again, Alfie Doherty is ready there to press. And Luton then are set up really well, pressing in pretty much like a 4-2-4. You've got the Clark here, the right winger, left winger Doherty, two central midfielders and two strikers. So really aggressive press. And then flip side of that, Jordan Clark has come out to press. I don't know who that would have been. It would have obviously been one of the lefts. Would it be Igor for Brighton? I'm not sure who started the game. That is obviously Estepinian, the left back. That ball's going to go in there. And there's the right wing back once again pressing really high. So they're not playing with that flat back five that they probably did at the start of the season. So if we flip that into FM, you know, we're looking at trap outside, much more often trigger press. This will change depending on what you are. Obviously, the Newcastle and Brighton ones have been extremely aggressive. Remember those player instructions that we've got here with the two wing backs. And then if we go into the opposition instructions, what you want to do is, depending on who you're playing, it would be for me, tight marking on the two fullbacks. That should then, and with the idea with that is that then allows the two wing backs to come further forward. If you're asking them to mark tightly and we've got man marking instructions set on them, we want them to be man marked tightly. And then we want a trigger press from the right centre half and the left centre half. That happens with one of the strikers, Adebayo or Carlton Morris. So what you could do with that as well, once you've clicked them on, is even have them man marking. You know, if we're playing Tottenham next, we could maybe man mark Christian Romero on the right side, and then we would man mark Mickey van der Ven on that side, just so we get that really good, intense press from those four players. And as you can see, everyone, we've started this season. Okay, interesting in and around a lot of those teams that in real life we've got those statistics with. Played 6, won 1, just against Tottenham Hotspur. I'll show you the 2 goals from a high press. 2 draws against Bournemouth and Everton, 1-1 and 0-0. And then 3 defeats. Look at the defeats. Chelsea, Man United and Arsenal. So we've had a really difficult start to the season. We've managed to beat Exeter 3-0 in the Carabao. And then we've just beaten Tottenham 2-0. A very well-deserved 2-0. Dominated the stats. They didn't. I did the highlights and key highlights. I don't think they even had a key highlight, Spurs. And we've managed to win the game late on. 2 Adebayo goals. 1 coming from a transition as well. Nicking the ball high. Like Sammy Lokonga going in, intercepting a pass. Now, I didn't do any specific marking instructions on him. It could be a thing that you do if you realise the gap between them is too big. If you really want in that high press, sometimes you do need them to be a little bit closer to stop the press. You know, if we look at that screenshot from Newcastle again, the screenshot is really high and they're kind of making Newcastle go long. So might be something that we have to do with the two midfielders. Carlton Morris in that little hole. Alfie Doherty is way back here on that left-hand side. Townsend, and then the 2 strikers. We win it nice and high. We play it. Coley Rudrow's come on for Carlton Morris, by the way. Into Townsend. He's playing that narrow roll look. So what he's actually doing, I think what it does leave is leaves a lot of 1v1s because the 2 centre-halves are marking the 2 strikers. Davis, he's looking at Townsend, and then obviously we've got Ogbene that we can use at times. That ball could have quite easily gone out there, but obviously the vision of Ross Barkley to find Townsend, and then Adebayo scores. He then scores late on as well, 88th minute. It's just a great move. I think the inverted winger on support does help a little bit in build-up, and what it does, it leaves a hole, because Udogie is now the left fullback. He's come on for Davies. The left winger in Perisic is not paying attention. Left wing back has come in. Remember, Townsend's sitting out, and it just leaves that big hole. And like that could even be found with 2 passes like it actually does, because it goes from Mengi into Townsend, but there's no reason why Mengi couldn't just drill one into that space. And then obviously Ogbene's got that tremendous athleticism. We've got him. I did change in the instructions as well, guys. Cross more often for him because we were really threatening with the 2 strikers that we've got. Cross in, and there he is. Now, this is Luton Town. I think if you did 100 replications with Luton Town and just left it, they would probably get relegated. With this, I think it does give us a chance, and I do think it will work. I think it's a good tactic to block teams out. Second legs in European games, you know, what you need though is 2 good wing backs, and you need that firepower up front in terms of physicality, jumping reach, a little bit of speed in that advance forward as well, so then you can break and counter. All right, guys, I hope you've enjoyed it. Every time I do one of these videos, I end up falling in love with the guy, and Rob Edwards is exactly the same. I will leave a link down in the description to a 1-0 victory Coach's Voice video. It's from the championship season, but I still think it's really cool, so go check that out. Let me know which other tactical replications you would like to see on the channel very soon. We've got my blueprint coming, my real life tactic that I would like to implement if I ever go back to sort of like coaching local league football, so that'll be pretty cool. And we're also going to be looking at Clement, the Rangers manager that has done extremely well since he was appointed earlier on in the season. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Check out the Patreon. Cheers.